She buried her white wolf for 7 years until she was forced to shift before the Alpha King. The iron shackles bit into Aurelia's wrists, but it wasn't the metal that made her bleed. It was the full moon rising through the courthouse skylight, spilling silver across marble floors like accusation made visible. Like every secret she'd swallowed for 7 years suddenly had weight, had teeth, had a voice that scraped the inside of her ribs and begged to be heard. Not tonight. Please, not tonight. But the moon didn't negotiate. Neither did the 200 wolves packed into the Alpha King's grand hall, their eyes glittering with the kind of hunger that came before execution. They wanted a show. They wanted blood. They wanted to watch an Omega crumble under the weight of false accusations and forced submission. What they didn't know, what no one could know, was that the wolf they expected to see wasn't the wolf that lived inside her chest. Aurelia kept her gaze on the black marble floor, counting the veins of gold running through the stone. 17 from where she knelt to the base of the dais. 43 from the entrance to the throne. She'd counted them twice already since they'd dragged her in here, wrists bound, dignity stripped, her name turned to ash by a lie she couldn't even defend. Because defending herself would mean speaking. And if she spoke, her voice would crack. If her voice cracked, her control would slip. And if her control slipped, Aurelia of the Ashbale Pack. The voice that spoke her name wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Alpha King Kalen Amnal didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout or snarl or posture like the lesser alphas who served him. He simply existed in a space, and that space bent around him like gravity had a favorite. Aurelia's wolf stirred. No. No, no, no. She shoved it down. Deeper. Past the place where her heartbeat lived, past the marrow of her bones, into that cold, dark corner where she'd been burying it piece by piece for 7 years. Every full moon, another layer of sediment. Another stone on the grave. It was the only way to survive. Look at me. The command rolled through the hall like thunder before rain, and Aurelia felt 200 wolves straighten in response. Alphas. Betas. Gammas from 6 territories. All of them instinctively obeying a king they feared more than death. But Aurelia had spent 7 years learning that fear was just another kind of chain. And she'd gotten very good at wearing chains. She lifted her head slowly, deliberately, until her eyes met his. Kalen Amnal sat on a throne carved from a single piece of black stone, his frame draped in the kind of elegance that came from never having to prove strength. Dark hair pulled back from a face too sharp to be kind, too controlled to be cruel. Eyes the color of winter rivers, gray and cold and deep enough to drown in. Those eyes narrowed slightly as they locked onto hers. For 3 seconds, the hall went silent. For 3 seconds, something passed between them that had no name, no logic, no place in a world where she was accused and he was judge. Then his expression shuddered and the moment died. You stand accused of theft from the royal treasury, Kalen said, his voice flat, judicial. Of using deception to gain access to sacred artifacts. Of betraying the trust of this court and every pack under my rule. Lies. Every word. But Aurelia had learned long ago that truth didn't matter when power had already decided your ending. The evidence is compelling, Kalen continued, gesturing to the table beside his throne where 3 witnesses sat, wolves she'd never seen before in her life, wearing expressions rehearsed to perfection. Unless you can provide proof of your innocence, the sentence is death. A ripple of satisfaction moved through the crowd. Wolves loved a hunt. Loved the moment before the kill when the prey finally understood there was no escape. Aurelia said nothing. However, Kalen added, and the single word sliced through the bloodlust like a blade, there is one way to prove your character before sentence is carried out. Her stomach dropped. She knew. Before he said it, she knew. Shift. The word landed like a stone in still water, and the ripples spread fast. Murmurs erupted across the hall. Excitement. Anticipation. The kind of collective cruelty that only came from wolves who'd forgotten what it meant to be prey. Shift here. Now. Before this court. Kalen's eyes never left hers. Show us the wolf you carry. If you are innocent, you have nothing to hide. If you are guilty. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. And Omega Wolf was small. Weak. The kind of shift that would confirm every assumption they'd already made about her, that she was nothing, that she deserved this, that her death would be a footnote in a history book no one would read. But a white wolf? A white wolf was extinction in a living body. A bloodline erased. A power that hadn't been seen in 3 generations because kings had hunted them down like a plague that needed burning. If she shifted, she would die. If she didn't shift, she would die. The shackles around her wrists suddenly felt like the kindest thing in the room. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, and she hated the sound of it. Hated the weakness. Hated that 7 years of silence was about to end with a whimper instead of a roar. Speak up, Kaelin commanded. Aurelia closed her eyes. The moon pressed against her skin from the inside, and her wolf, her beautiful, furious, ancient wolf, finally stopped being quiet. It didn't ask permission. It didn't wait for her to be ready. It had been buried for 7 years. And tonight, the grave was too shallow. Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Cindy's Wolfheart Stories. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button right now because tonight's story is going to take you on a journey you won't forget. And for those of you already part of our pack, drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from right now? I love seeing our wolf family spread across the world. Now, let's find out what happens when a wolf that was never meant to kneel finally breaks free. The first crack wasn't loud. It was the sound of a bone remembering what it used to be before she'd taught it to forget. A whisper of cartilage stretching, of a spine that had spent 7 years curved in submission, suddenly recalling the architecture of sovereignty. Aurelia's eyes snapped open. No, not here. Not like this. But her wolf wasn't listening anymore. It had listened for 7 years. It had obeyed every desperate plea, every frantic bargain, every full moon where Aurelia had bled from the inside just to keep it contained. It had watched her bow her head to wolves half her strength, had felt her heartbeat stutter with fear every time someone looked too long, asked too many questions, came too close to the truth. And it was done. I can't, Aurelia gasped, the words ripping out of her throat as her bones began to shift beneath her skin. Please, I can't. You will. Kaelin's voice cut through her panic like a blade through silk. Or you will die refusing, and we will assume guilt either way. The crowd pressed closer, a living wall of anticipation. She could smell their excitement, thick and cloying, the scent of wolves who'd never had to hide what they were, who'd never understood that survival sometimes meant suffocating your own nature until you couldn't remember what breathing felt like. Her wrists burned where the iron shackles held her. Iron. The only metal that could suppress a shift, slow it down, make it agonizing. But not stop it. Not when the wolf had finally decided it was tired of dying quietly. Aurelia's vision blurred. The grand hall spun, all marble and gold, and the cold gray eyes of a king watching her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve before he could justify her execution. Think. But thinking required air, and air required lungs that weren't currently trying to reshape themselves. 7 years ago, she'd learned to bury her wolf in a single night. The night her mother died. Listen to me, Aurelia. Her mother's voice had been steady despite the blood staining her lips, despite the way her body was already cooling on the forest floor where the hunters had left her. You are the last. Do you understand? The last white wolf in 6 kingdoms. Aurelia had been 17, still young enough to believe that love could stop death, that begging could rewrite fate. Please don't go. Please. They will hunt you. Her mother's hand had gripped hers with the last of her strength. The way they hunted your father. Your grandmother. Every white wolf who ever existed. Because we don't bow, Aurelia. It's not in our blood. And kings can't rule what won't kneel. Then I'll run. Running isn't enough. Her mother's eyes had burned with fever and something fiercer, the kind of love that knew it was about to become a ghost. You have to bury it. The wolf. Bury it so deep that even you forget it exists. I can't. You can. You will. Her mother had pulled her close, pressing their foreheads together. Because if you don't, they will kill you. And if they kill you, our bloodline dies. 3,000 years of history. Gone. The moon had been full that night too. Aurelia had held her mother's body until dawn, and then she'd done the impossible. She'd looked at her white wolf, the magnificent, silver-white creature that was her birthright, her power, her soul, and she'd buried it alive inside her own chest. Every full moon after that, it tried to claw its way out. Every full moon, she shoved it back down. 7 years. 84 moons. 84 small deaths. Now, Aurelia. Kaylin's voice dragged her back to the present. Back to the iron shackles and the watching crowd and the impossible choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Shift and be exposed. Refuse and be executed. Die fast or die slow. Her wolf snarled inside her chest, and for the first time in 7 years, Aurelia felt something besides fear. She felt rage. Rage at a world that had made her survival contingent on self-erasure. Rage at the hunters who'd killed her mother for the crime of existing. Rage at herself for believing that if she just stayed small enough, quiet enough, invisible enough, she might be allowed to live. And rage, burning, bottomless rage at the Alpha King sitting on his black throne, watching her suffer with the detached curiosity of someone who'd never had to choose between his nature and his survival. You want to see my wolf? Aurelia's voice came out raw, shredded. Fine. Kaylin's eyes flashed with something that might have been surprise. But when you do, she continued, her gaze locked on his, remember that you asked for this. She stopped fighting. The shift that had been building for 7 years finally broke free. The iron shackles shattered first. Not from force. From heat. From the kind of ancient power that remembered when metal was still part of the earth, still soft, still obedient. The sound of iron cracking echoed through the hall like a gunshot, and the crowd gasped as one living thing. Aurelia's body convulsed. Bones snapped and reformed. Skin split and knitted back together. Her human shape collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, and something else, something vast, began to take its place. The pain was exquisite. 7 years of suppressed shifts all happening at once. 7 years of a wolf that had been caged in flesh finally remembering what it meant to have teeth, to have claws, to have a voice that could shake the foundations of the earth. Aurelia screamed, and the sound was already halfway to a howl. The marble beneath her cracked. The air pressure in the hall dropped so suddenly that wolves pressed their hands to their ears, trying to equalize. Candles flickered and died. The moonlight streaming through the skylight brightened until it was almost blinding. And then, silence. Absolute. Suffocating. The kind of silence that came before God spoke. Aurelia's wolf stood in the center of the hall where a broken girl had knelt just moments before. But it wasn't small. It wasn't weak. It wasn't the Omega shift they'd expected to mock. The white wolf stood nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, its fur the color of new snow kissed by moonlight. Not gray. Not silver. White. Pure, radiant, impossible white. Its eyes were ice blue, ancient, burning with an intelligence that had watched empires rise and fall. Every wolf in the hall felt it. The weight. The presence. The wrongness of standing in the same room as something their instincts screamed was above them in a hierarchy they didn't have words for. Alphas took involuntary steps back. Betas lowered their eyes. Even the gammas, wolves bred for war, felt their knees weaken. And on his throne, Kaylin Amnol went absolutely still. His face revealed nothing. But his hands gripped the arms of his throne with enough force that the stone cracked beneath his fingers. Because he knew. Every alpha in 6 kingdoms had been taught the history. The bedtime stories that were really warnings. The bloodline that had been systematically erased because their existence was a threat to every throne in the realm. White wolves didn't have alphas. They were alphas. Born, not made. Carrying a power so old it predated kingdoms, predated pack law, predated the idea that strength could be organized into hierarchies. They were the first wolves. The original Dominion. And they'd been hunted to extinction for one simple reason. A true alpha couldn't rule where a white wolf stood. Aurelia's wolf turned its massive head, those ice-blue eyes locking onto Kaelin with an intelligence that was terrifyingly, devastatingly human. And then it did something that made every wolf in the hall forget how to breathe. It didn't lower its gaze. It didn't submit. It looked at the Alpha King of 6 territories like he was the one who needed to prove his worth. Kaelin's wolf surged to the surface, gray and powerful, and nothing compared to what stood before him. For 3 heartbeats, the 2 wolves stared at each other across the marble floor. For 3 heartbeats, the entire room waited for one of them to break. And then Kaelin felt it. The bond. Snapping into place like a chain forged in the moment of creation, ancient and absolute and wrong in every way that mattered. Mate. His wolf recognized her. His soul recognized her. And the horror of it was that he'd just forced his mate to expose the one secret that would get her killed. The bond hit Kaelin like a blade between the ribs. Sharp. Precise. Unavoidable. No. He'd had 28 years to prepare for this moment. 28 years of searching, waiting, half hoping the mate bond was a myth his parents had used to justify their own political marriage. And in all those years, in all his strategies and contingencies and carefully laid plans, he'd never once considered this. That his mate would be the one thing he couldn't afford to protect. A white wolf. A death sentence wrapped in white fur and ice-blue eyes. Kaelin forced his expression into the mask he'd worn since he was 12 years old, the face of a king who felt nothing, questioned nothing, bent for nothing. But inside, his wolf was howling. Mate. Mate. Protect. Claim. Mine. Interesting, he said, and his voice came out colder than he'd intended. Colder than he'd ever spoken to anyone, even his enemies. Because if he showed weakness now, if he showed anything now, she would die, and he would be the one who killed her. The white wolf's ears flicked forward. Those ancient eyes watched him with an awareness that made his skin prickle. She knew. Somehow, she knew exactly what was happening inside him. And she looked furious. The crowd was still frozen. 200 wolves caught between awe and terror, waiting for their king to tell them how to react to something that shouldn't exist. Kaelin had maybe 10 seconds before someone remembered that white wolves were supposed to be extinct. Before someone connected the dots. Before the whispers started and spread like wildfire until every pack in 6 kingdoms knew that the last white wolf was standing in his court. And then the hunters would come. Not his hunters. The old ones. The secret ones. The organization that had existed for 300 years with a single purpose, eradicate the white wolves before they could reclaim the power that had once made them unkillable. 10 seconds to decide if he was a king or a mate. Fascinating, he continued, rising from his throne with the fluid grace of a wolf who'd never had to think about dominance. It simply was. I've read about white wolves in the historical texts. Extinct bloodline. Legendary power. He descended the dais steps slowly, deliberately. Tell me, Aurelia, how long did you think you could hide this? Each word was a stone he placed between them. Each step a mile of distance he forced into the bond that was screaming at him to go to her, to touch her, to claim her before someone else did. The white wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth that could tear through steel. But she didn't attack. She was too smart for that. If she attacked the Alpha King in his own court, no power in the world would save her. Not even the bond. Especially not the bond. 7 years, Kaelin continued, stopping 10 feet away from her. Close enough to see the intelligence burning in those ice-blue eyes. Close enough to feel the heat radiating off her massive frame. You've been hiding for 7 years. Which means you knew exactly what you were. You knew the law. There is no law against being born. He heard her voice in his head, clear, furious, intimate in a way that made his wolf claw at his control. The mate bond. Already bridging the gap between human and wolf, creating a connection that would only grow stronger the longer they were in proximity. Respond and she'll know you hear her. Stay silent and she'll think you're immune. Kaelin kept his face blank. The penalty for concealing your true nature from the crown is death, he said, and each word felt like swallowing glass. The penalty for being a white wolf is. He paused, letting the silence stretch. Also death. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. Wolves who thought this was still a trial, still a show, still something they could understand. They had no idea they were watching a king try to figure out how to save his mate without losing his throne. The white wolf shifted her weight, muscles coiling beneath that pristine white fur. Her gaze never left his. "You're going to kill me for existing?" Her voice in his head was bitter, resigned. The tone of someone who'd spent 7 years waiting for this exact moment. "I'm going to save your life," he thought back, knowing she couldn't hear him, hating that she couldn't hear him. "Even if you hate me for how I do it." However, Kalen said, pitching his voice to carry across the hall, the original accusation was theft. "And you've just proven something extraordinary." He gestured to the shattered iron shackles on the floor. Only a wolf of significant power could break iron chains. Only a wolf of noble blood could shift under the suppression of iron in the first place. He watched comprehension flicker across the white wolf's face the moment she realized he was building her a cage made of loopholes. "Which means," he continued, turning to address the crowd, "that either our intelligence about the theft was flawed, or we have a much larger problem on our hands." Whispers erupted. Confusion. Fear. The beginning of doubt. "Lord Rawl." Kalen focused on a wolf standing near the front, Darken Rawl, his head of security, a brutal man who'd served his father and knew exactly how to make problems disappear. "Take Aurelia to the East Tower. Maximum security. No visitors. No communication. Prison or protection. She won't know the difference." Darken stepped forward, his face unreadable. "And the charges, Your Majesty?" "Postponed pending further investigation." Kalen forced himself to look away from the white wolf, to address the crowd as if she were already gone. If she's a white wolf, then someone wanted her dead badly enough to frame her for a crime that would force her to reveal herself. That implies conspiracy. That implies threat. It was a masterful spin. Brilliant, even. He was taking the target off her back by painting her as a victim instead of a danger. But every wolf in the room who'd studied history knew the truth. White wolves weren't victims. They were the reason kingdoms fell. "Your Majesty." A voice from the back of the hall, sharp and carrying. "With respect, the law is clear. White wolves were declared enemies of the realm after the Purge. King's law, signed by your grandfather. Any white wolf found alive is to be executed immediately." Kalen turned slowly toward the speaker, a woman with silver hair and eyes like flint. Counselor Denna. Old guard. His father's advisor before she'd become his burden. "Are you suggesting," Kalen said softly, dangerously, "that I don't know my own laws?" Denna didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting that personal interest shouldn't override 300 years of precedent." The words landed like an accusation. Personal interest. She knew. Or she suspected. And if she suspected, others would too. The bond was less than 5 minutes old, and it was already trying to kill them both. Kalen felt his wolf bare its teeth inside his chest. Felt the urge to rip out Denna's throat for daring to threaten his mate, for daring to question his authority, for daring to exist in a moment when everything he'd built was balanced on a knife's edge. But he was a king before he was a wolf. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. "The law," Kalen said, his voice dropping to a register that made even the alphas in the room lower their eyes, "is subject to interpretation by the reigning monarch. And I interpret this situation as requiring further examination before an irreversible sentence is carried out." He turned back to Darken. "Take her. Now." The white wolf growled, a sound that rattled the chandeliers and made wolves twice her size take involuntary steps back. "You're making a mistake," her voice whispered through the bond. "You should kill me now. Before they do it for you." Kalen met her eyes one last time. And he let her see, just for a second, past the mask he wore. Let her see the wolf who'd just found his mate and would burn the world to keep her breathing. Then the mask slammed back into place. "Go," he commanded. Darken moved with 6 guards, surrounding the white wolf with silver-tipped spears, not to hurt her, but to hurt her. to make it look like she was dangerous, contained, controlled. The white wolf held Kaylin's gaze for 3 more heartbeats. Then she turned, her massive frame moving with liquid grace, and allowed herself to be led from the hall. The moment she disappeared through the doors, Kaylin felt the bond stretch, not break, but thin, like a rope pulled taut. It hurt. Everything hurt. Your Majesty. Denna's voice again, sharp and probing. What do you intend to do with her? Kaylin turned to face his council, his court, the 200 wolves who needed to believe their king was still in control. What I intend, he said coldly, is to find out who framed her. And when I do, I'm going to make them wish I'd simply executed them. It was a threat and a promise and a misdirection all at once. Because the truth was, he had no idea what he was going to do. His mate was a white wolf. His mate was supposed to be dead. His mate was the one thing in the world he couldn't protect without losing everything he'd sacrificed to become king. And the bond between them was already stronger than any oath he'd ever sworn. In the East Tower, locked behind walls 3 feet thick and doors reinforced with silver, Aurelia shifted back to human form. The transformation hurt worse in reverse. 7 years of suppression meant her body had forgotten the rhythm, forgotten the way bones were supposed to slide back into place, the way skin was supposed to remember its human shape. She collapsed on the stone floor, naked and shaking, her body covered in sweat and blood from where the shift had torn her open from the inside. But she was alive. For now. Mate. The word echoed through her head, bitter and impossible. The Alpha King was her mate. The one wolf in 6 kingdoms who had the power to kill her legally, publicly, righteously, was the one wolf the universe had decided she was supposed to love. Aurelia laughed, and the sound came out broken. 7 years. She'd buried her wolf for 7 years, had bled and suffered and died a little bit every full moon just to survive. And for what? To discover that the universe had a sense of humor after all. That fate wasn't kind or fair or remotely interested in her survival. It just was. And right now, it was trying to kill her in the cruelest way possible. By giving her a mate she could never have. 3 days. Aurelia had been in the East Tower for 3 days, and no one had come except the guards who slid food through a slot in the door twice a day, and the healer who'd examined her injuries in silence before leaving without a word. 3 days of stone walls and silver-reinforced bars and the constant, aching pull of the mate bond stretching between her and a king who hadn't visited once. She told herself it was better this way. Told herself that distance was survival. Told herself that the hollow feeling in her chest was just hunger, just exhaustion, just the aftershock of 7 years of suppression finally ending. It wasn't the bond. It couldn't be the bond. Because if it was the bond, then she was already lost. Aurelia pressed her forehead against the cold stone wall and tried to remember what her mother's voice sounded like. Tried to remember the last words she'd spoken before she died. If they kill you, our bloodline dies. 3,000 years of history. And it was going to end in a tower at the hands of a mate who looked at her like she was a problem that needed solving instead of a person worth saving. You're being unfair, her wolf murmured. The first time it had spoken since the shift. He's trying to protect us. By locking us in a cage? By keeping us alive when every law says we should be dead. Aurelia closed her eyes. Her wolf wasn't wrong. Kaylin had bought them time, had spun the narrative so expertly that the crowd had left confused instead of bloodthirsty. But time wasn't freedom. And protection that came with bars was still imprisonment. The sound of footsteps in the corridor made her tense. Not the measured tread of guards changing shifts. Something lighter. Quicker. A woman. The door opened without warning, no knock, no announcement, and a figure stepped inside wearing a dark cloak and an expression that was equal parts curiosity and calculation. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things were beautiful. Dark hair cropped short, eyes the color of amber, a scar running from her left temple to her jaw that looked earned rather than accidental. So the woman said, closing the door behind her. You're the white wolf that has my brother losing sleep. Brother. Aurelia's mind raced through everything she knew about the Alpha King's family. His parents were dead, killed in a territorial dispute 8 years ago. He'd been 20, barely trained, when he'd inherited 6 kingdoms in chaos. He'd stabilized them in less than 2 years. Brutal efficiency, the rumors said. No mercy for dissent, no tolerance for weakness. But no one mentioned a sister. I can see you doing the math, the woman continued, crossing the room with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Yes, I exist. No, he doesn't advertise it. Keeps me off the official records. Finds it useful to have family that can move through the world without a crown hanging over their head. She stopped a few feet away from Aurelia, studying her with the kind of intensity usually reserved for battlefield assessments. I'm Kara, she said finally. And before you ask, yes, I know what you are. Yes, I know the law says you should be dead. And yes, I'm here because my brother sent me. A pause. Though he doesn't know I'm here right now, which means we have about 10 minutes before his security detail realizes I slipped past them. Aurelia found her voice. Why would the Alpha King send his secret sister to visit his prisoner? Prisoner. Kara tested the word, then smiled without humor. Is that what you think you are? I'm locked in a tower under armed guard. What else would I be? Protected. Kara moved to the window, the only source of natural light in the room, and looked out over the kingdom sprawling below. There are 17 wolves in the council who want you executed. 9 who want you studied like a specimen in a laboratory. And 3 who want to use you as a political tool. She turned back to Aurelia. My brother is the only thing standing between you and all of them. How noble. Noble? Kara laughed. Kaelin stopped being noble when our parents died and left him a throne covered in blood. He's calculating. Strategic. And right now, you're the biggest threat to his rule he's ever faced. The words should have stung. Instead, they just confirmed what Aurelia already knew. So why doesn't he kill me? Kara's expression shifted. Became something softer, almost pitying. You really don't know, do you? Aurelia's stomach dropped. Know what? The bond. Kara said it like it was obvious. Like it was written in the air between them. He's your mate, and you're his. And he's trying to figure out how to keep you alive without losing his throne. There it was. Spoken out loud. Made real. Aurelia sank onto the narrow bed, her legs suddenly unsteady. He told you. He didn't have to. I've known Kaelin for 28 years. I can read him better than anyone alive. Kara crossed her arms. The way he looked at you in that hall, the way he's been pacing his study for 3 days like a caged animal, the way he's systematically dismantling every wolf who spoke against you in the trial, she shook her head. That's not strategy. That's desperation. He can't, Aurelia's voice cracked. We can't. No, you can't. Kara's tone was matter of fact. The mate bond is sacred, but you're a white wolf. If he claims you publicly, it will look like he's been compromised. Like you've used some ancient power to ensnare him. The council will revolt. The packs will fracture. And the hunters, the real hunters, not the palace guard, will come for both of you. Aurelia pressed her hands against her face. Then why tell me? Why not just let him figure out a way to reject the bond? Because rejection will kill you both. Kara's voice went soft. Maybe not immediately. But the bond is already formed. I can see it on you, the way you keep touching your chest like something's pulling. The way your eyes track toward his study even though you don't know where it is. Aurelia's hand dropped from her face. She'd been doing exactly that. Turning toward the West Wing without conscious thought, following an invisible thread. It's the same for him, Kara continued. Worse, maybe, because he's fighting it. And Kaelin fights everything he can't control. She moved closer, crouching so they were eye level. So I'm here to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you want to live? That's not a real question. It is for you. Kara's amber eyes were unflinching. Because living means trusting my brother. Means letting him protect you in ways that will feel like betrayal. Means surviving long enough to figure out if there's any future where you both make it out alive. And if I don't trust him, then you're already dead. Kara stood. And, honestly, that might be easier for everyone. The words hung in the air between them, brutal and true. Aurelia had spent 7 years surviving. 7 years making impossible choices. 7 years learning that easy deaths were often kinder than hard lives. But her wolf stirred. We didn't survive this long to give up now. We survived this long by being smart. By knowing when to run. And where exactly would you run? Her wolf's voice was dry. He's our mate. The bond will pull us back. Always. Aurelia looked at Kara, at this woman who was apparently the Alpha King's greatest secret and greatest weapon. What does he want from me? Time. Kara moved toward the door. He needs time to dismantle the Council's resistance. Time to find out who framed you and why. Time to figure out if there's a way to change a 300-year-old law without causing a civil war. And in the meantime, I'm supposed to just wait? In the meantime, you're supposed to stay alive. Kara paused with her hand on the door handle. Oh, and Aurelia? Whatever you do, don't shift again. Not unless you have no choice. Why? Because the bond gets stronger in wolf form. And if you and Kaylin are both shifted in close proximity. She trailed off. Let's just say his control isn't infinite. And the last thing either of you needs is for the Council to walk in on something that confirms every fear they have about white wolves and mates. Heat flooded Aurelia's face. Kara's smile was sharp. Yeah, that's what I thought. She opened the door. Someone will bring you dinner in an hour. Try to eat. You're going to need your strength. For what? For surviving my brother. Kara's expression turned serious. He's a good king, Aurelia. Better than our father ever was. But good kings make terrible choices when they're trying to save the people they love. Remember that. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Aurelia's chest ache. Alone again. Except she wasn't really alone, was she? The bond hummed beneath her skin, a constant reminder that somewhere in this massive castle, a king was pacing and plotting and probably cursing fate for giving him a mate he couldn't afford to keep. We should shift, her wolf suggested. Test what his sister said. See if he comes. That's insane. So is being locked in a tower waiting for someone else to decide if we live or die. Aurelia wanted to argue. Wanted to be smart, cautious, careful like she'd been for 7 years. But her wolf was right. She'd spent 7 years being small. Maybe it was time to be dangerous instead. Kaylin felt the shift the moment it happened. 1 second, he was in his study reviewing supply chains for the Northern Territories. The next, every nerve in his body lit up like lightning, and his wolf surged. Mate. Mate is shifted. Go. He was on his feet before conscious thought caught up. The bond, which had been a constant ache for 3 days, suddenly flared into something impossible to ignore. Every instinct screamed at him to run to the East Tower, to make sure she was safe, to claim what was his. Kaylin gripped the edge of his desk hard enough to crack the wood. Control. 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 But his wolf didn't understand control. It understood mate. And mate was shifted and alone and vulnerable in a tower surrounded by guards who could decide she was too dangerous to keep alive. The door to his study burst open. Darkin stood there, his face grim. Your Majesty, the prisoner. I know. Kaylin's voice came out more growl than words. Status. She shifted 10 minutes ago. The guards report she's not aggressive. Just pacing. But Darkin hesitated. But what? The bond, Your Majesty. The guards can feel it. Even from outside the room. They're saying it's... He searched for words. Overwhelming. Like standing next to lightning about to strike. Kaylin closed his eyes. Of course. The mate bond was powerful enough that even non-bonded wolves could sense it when both parties were shifted. Which meant his secret was about to become common knowledge. Double the guard, he said. No one enters that room without my direct permission. And if anyone speaks about what they're feeling, they answer to me personally. Yes, Your Majesty. Darkin paused. Are you going to? No. But the bond. I said no. Kaylin forced himself to release the desk before he shattered it completely. Dismissed. Darkin left, but his expression said he knew exactly what refusing the bond was costing. Kaylin waited until the door closed, then drove his fist into the wall. Stone cracked. His knuckles split. And the bond ached. Go to her, his wolf demanded. She's calling for us. She's not calling. She's testing. So pass the test. Kalen wanted to laugh. Wanted to scream. Wanted to shift and run to the East Tower and damn every consequence. But he was a king. And kings didn't get to choose mates over kingdoms. In the East Tower, Aurelia's white wolf paced the length of the cell for the 100th time. She could feel him. Feel his wolf responding to hers. Feel the bond stretching between them like a rope being pulled taut. Come on, she thought. If you're going to kill me, at least have the courage to look me in the eye. But he didn't come. Minutes stretched into an hour. The bond ached. And Aurelia finally understood what Kara had meant. Kalen wasn't going to kill her. He was going to save her. Even if it destroyed them both. The assassin came on the 4th night. Aurelia was still in wolf form, had been for 6 hours now, too restless to shift back, too angry to care about Kara's warning, when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something else. Something wrong. Her ears swiveled toward the door, every sense suddenly on high alert. The guards outside her room were talking in low voices. Normal. Routine. But underneath their conversation was another sound. Softer. Deliberate. Scraping. Someone was working on the lock from the outside, and it wasn't the guards. Aurelia's wolf went utterly still, every muscle coiled to spring. The door opened silently, too silently for something that heavy, and a figure slipped inside dressed head to toe in black, face covered, movements liquid and precise. Professional. The figure closed the door without a sound, then turned to face the cell. And froze. Because where they'd expected to find a human woman sleeping, they found a white wolf watching them with ice-blue eyes that reflected the moonlight like mirrors. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then the assassin's hand went to their belt, drawing a blade that gleamed silver in the darkness. Silver. Pure silver. The only metal that could kill a wolf permanently, prevent regeneration, make death absolute. Aurelia's lips pulled back from her teeth. The assassin lunged. They were faster than any normal wolf, enhanced by something chemical or magical or both. The blade whistled through the air aimed straight for Aurelia's heart. But Aurelia had spent 7 years learning to move like prey. And prey knew how to survive. She twisted sideways, the blade missing by inches, and her jaws clamped down on the assassin's wrist with enough force to shatter bone. The assassin didn't scream. That was the first sign they weren't just a hired killer. They used the momentum of Aurelia's attack to roll, breaking her grip and coming up with a second blade already drawn. 2 blades. Both silver. They'd come prepared. The fight that followed was brutal and silent. Aurelia was larger, stronger, more powerful in every measurable way. But the assassin had training that came from centuries of hunting wolves like her. They knew where to cut, how to move, which angles would bypass her defenses. And they were aiming to kill, not capture. Aurelia's blood painted the stone floor in silver-red streaks. Her shoulder. Her flank. Shallow cuts designed to weaken, to slow, to make the killing blow easier. But she was a white wolf. And white wolves had survived 300 years of systematic genocide by being unkillable. The assassin feinted left, blade arcing toward Aurelia's throat. She caught their arm in her jaws and bit down, tearing through muscle and tendon until the limb went limp. The assassin stumbled back, finally making a sound, a sharp intake of breath that might have been pain or simply frustration. Then they reached for something at their belt. Aurelia saw the vial a second too late. Glass shattered against the floor, and white smoke erupted thick, cloying, burning her nose and throat and lungs. Wolfsbane. Concentrated enough to drop a normal wolf in seconds. Aurelia's vision swam. Her legs went weak. And the assassin raised their remaining blade for the final strike. The door exploded inward. Not opened. Exploded. Torn off its hinges by something massive and gray and absolutely enraged. Kalen's wolf was bigger than Aurelia had imagined, easily 7 feet at the shoulder, dark gray fur that was almost black, eyes like winter storms. He moved with the speed of a king who'd spent his entire life training for war. The assassin tried to turn, tried to bring the blade around, tried to do something. Kalen's jaws closed around their throat, and there was a sickening crunch. The assassin dropped without ceremony, dead before they hit the ground. Kalen released the body and spun toward Aurelia, his wolf's eyes wild, searching for injury. She tried to stay standing, tried to show she was fine, that she'd handled it, that she didn't need saving. But the wolf's bane was in her system now, and white wolves, for all their power, were just as vulnerable to poison as any other wolf. Her legs folded. Kalen was there before she hit the ground, his massive frame supporting hers, a sound rumbling from his chest that was somewhere between a growl and a whimper. "I'm okay," she tried to say through the bond. But the bond was screaming too loud for words. Mate was hurt. Mate was bleeding. Mate was vulnerable. Every instinct Kalen had been suppressing for 4 days roared to the surface at once. He shifted. It was instant, fluid, perfect, the shift of a wolf who'd been doing it since childhood. Human arms replaced wolf forelegs, catching Aurelia as she collapsed fully. "Stay with me," Kalen commanded, his voice rough. "Don't you dare." Aurelia shifted too. She didn't mean to, didn't want to. But the bond was pulling, and her wolf was too weak to resist, and suddenly she was human and naked and bleeding in the arms of the Alpha King, who was also naked and smelling like winter pine and dominance. "You're an idiot," Kalen said, but his hands were gentle as they checked her wounds. "Shifting in your cell. Drawing attention. Making yourself a target. Someone already did that," Aurelia managed. Her tongue felt thick. The wolf's bane was strong. The frame job. The trial. This. She gestured weakly at the dead assassin. Kalen's expression went dark. "I know. You know. I've known since the trial." His hands moved to the worst wound on her shoulder, applying pressure. The evidence was too clean. The witnesses too practiced. Someone wanted you exposed and killed. Then why didn't you say? "Because I needed to know who." Kalen's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw past the mask he wore. Saw the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate calculation of a king trying to save one life without losing a kingdom. "And now I do." "Who?" "Counselor Denna." The name came out flat. "She's been working with the Hunters Guild for 15 years. Ever since they killed the last white wolf." He stopped. "Your mother." The world tilted. "She killed my mother?" "She gave the order." Kalen's jaw was tight. "And when she discovered you existed, she arranged everything. The frame job. The trial. This assassination. All to finish what she started 7 years ago." Aurelia felt something break inside her chest. Not the bond. Something older. The careful wall she'd built around her grief. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why does she care? White wolves are extinct. We're no threat to. You're every threat." Kalen's hands were still on her shoulder, still trying to stop the bleeding, but his eyes were locked on hers. "You don't understand what you are, Aurelia. What your bloodline represents. I'm the last. You're the first." He cut her off. "The original Dominion. 3,000 years ago, before pack law, before territories, before kings, there were white wolves. And they didn't rule through strength or intimidation. They ruled through birthright, through a power so absolute that other wolves instinctively followed. No force required. No proof of dominance needed. They just were." Aurelia's breath caught. "That's a myth. It's history." Kalen's voice was quiet, certain. "And Denna knows it. Every member of the Hunters Guild knows it. They've spent 300 years making sure white wolves stayed extinct because if even one of you survived to maturity, if even one of you learned to use your power." He trailed off. "What?" "You could unmake every throne in 6 kingdoms without lifting a claw." Kalen's hands finally left her shoulder, but he didn't move away. "Including mine." The words hung between them, heavy and absolute. And Aurelia finally understood. She wasn't just his mate. She was his greatest threat. The one thing in the world that could strip him of everything he'd bled to build. "So why save me?" she whispered. Why not let the assassin finish the job? Kalen's laugh was bitter. Because I'm an idiot who can't kill his mate even when logic says he should. His hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about the Alpha King. Because the bond won't let me. Because my wolf would rather die than watch you bleed. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Because maybe, just maybe, there's a world where we both survive this. Where you don't have to bury what you are, and I don't have to choose between my mate and my crown. That world doesn't exist, Aurelia said, but her body betrayed her, leaning into his touch. Then we'll make it exist. Kalen's eyes burned with something fierce and foolish and absolutely determined. Starting with Denna. You can't just execute a counselor. I'm the Alpha King. His voice went cold. I can do whatever is necessary to protect my kingdom. And right now, the biggest threat to my kingdom is a counselor conspiring with assassins to murder my— He stopped. Mate. The word hung unspoken. Aurelia's heart was beating too fast. The wolfsbane was still in her system, making everything feel distant and immediate at the same time. This is insane, she said. Yes. We're going to die. Probably. The bond is going to tear us apart if we can't. Kalen kissed her. It wasn't gentle. Wasn't soft. It was desperate and claiming and tasted like blood and winter and 7 years of denial finally breaking. Aurelia should have pulled away. Should have been smart, careful, strategic. Instead, she kissed him back. The bond sang. It roared through both of them like wildfire, like recognition, like coming home to a place neither of them knew they'd been searching for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kalen pressed his forehead against hers. I can't reject the bond, he said quietly. I tried. For 4 days I tried. But it's already too strong. I know. Aurelia's hands had found his shoulders without her permission. I can feel it too. So we have 2 choices. Kalen pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. We can hide what you are for the rest of your life. Lock you away somewhere safe, somewhere secret, and I visit when I can. Live half a life through a bond we can never publicly acknowledge. Or we fight. His smile was sharp. Dangerous. We take down Denna and everyone working with her. We change the law. We make the council accept that white wolves aren't the enemy they were taught to fear. He paused. And we do it together. As mates. As equals. As the most terrifying power couple 6 kingdoms have ever seen. Aurelia stared at him. That's suicide. That's kingship. Kalen stood, pulling her up with him. I've been king for 8 years, Aurelia. 8 years of making impossible choices. 8 years of sacrificing everything personal for duty. His hands framed her face. And I'm tired. I'm tired of choosing between what's right and what's necessary. I'm tired of burying who I am to be what they need. His eyes burned into hers. So I'm choosing you. And if the kingdom can't accept that, then maybe I was never meant to be their king. They'll kill you. They'll try. Kalen's smile was all wolf. But I'm very hard to kill. And now I have you. His thumb traced her lower lip. Do you have any idea what we could do together? A white wolf and an alpha king? There hasn't been that kind of power in the same room for 300 years. There's a reason for that. Yes, because they were afraid. Kalen's voice dropped. And fear makes people do terrible things. Like hunt down entire bloodlines. Like murder mothers in front of their daughters. Like force 17-year-old girls to bury their souls just to survive. Aurelia's breath hitched. I can't give you back the 7 years you lost, Kalen continued. Can't undo what Denna did to your mother. Can't erase the pain you've carried. His hands tightened on her face. But I can give you a choice. The first real choice you've had since the night your mother died. What choice? Run or fight? Simple. Absolute. I'll help you either way. If you want to disappear, I'll arrange it. New identity, new pack, new life. The bond will hurt, but we'll both survive. He leaned closer. Or you stay. You fight. You stop burying what you are and start remembering what your bloodline was meant to be. And together, we burn down every law, every prejudice, every fear that says you don't deserve to exist. Aurelia's wolf stirred. Not weakly. Not quietly. Fight. 7 years of being small. 7 years of being scared. 7 years of believing survival meant erasure. And suddenly, standing in a cell covered in blood with a king who'd just kissed her like she was worth dying for, Aurelia remembered. Her mother hadn't just told her to hide. She'd told her to survive. And survival didn't mean living small. It meant living long enough to fight back. Okay, Aurelia said. Kaylin's eyes widened slightly. Okay, we fight. She felt her wolf rise, felt the white wolf that had been buried for 7 years finally remember what it meant to have teeth. We take down Denna. We change the law. We make them see that white wolves aren't the monsters they were taught to fear. They'll come after you. Let them. Aurelia's smile was sharp. I've been running for 7 years. Time to see what happens when I stop. Kaylin's expression shifted into something fierce and proud and absolutely feral. Then we start now. He turned toward the door where guards were finally rushing in, drawn by the explosion and the sounds of fighting. Darken. The head of security appeared, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. The dead assassin, the Alpha King standing naked with his equally naked mate, the blood on the floor. To his credit, he didn't blink. Your Majesty. The prisoner is no longer a prisoner. Kaylin's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. She's under my personal protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Understood? Yes, Your Majesty. And send for the council. All of them. Meeting in 1 hour in the throne room. Kaylin's smile was cold. Tell them it's mandatory. Tell them their king has an announcement. Darken's eyes flickered with understanding. All of them, Your Majesty? Including Counselor Denna. Especially Counselor Denna. Darken bowed and left. Aurelia looked at Kaylin. You're really going to do this? Publicly claim me as your mate? I'm really going to do this. He pulled her close and the bond hummed between them, warm and right and terrifying. And then we're going to watch Denna try to explain why she sent an assassin to kill the Alpha King's mate. She'll deny it. Of course she will. Kaylin's eyes gleamed. But she'll do it while standing next to the assassin's body. The assassin who's carrying a vial of wolfsbane that can only be acquired through the Hunter's Guild. The assassin whose weapons are engraved with the Guild's mark. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. I've been building this case for 4 days, Aurelia. Waiting for her to make a move. And she just gave me everything I need to destroy her. Aurelia shivered. Not from fear. From recognition. This was the king who'd united 6 territories. Who'd crushed rebellions, dismantled conspiracies, ruled with an iron fist wrapped in velvet. And he'd just declared war on anyone who threatened his mate. We're really doing this, she said. We're really doing this. We might die. We might. Kaylin pulled back, his eyes locked on hers. But at least we'll die fighting. Together. As we were always meant to be. And standing there, covered in blood and bathed in moonlight, Aurelia felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. The throne room was packed. Every counselor. Every alpha of significance. Every wolf who had power or influence or simply the right bloodline to be present when their king made an announcement. They'd come expecting intrigue, maybe scandal, possibly a political maneuvering. What they got was Kaylin standing before his throne in full royal regalia, and beside him, dressed in clothes borrowed from Kara, hair still damp from a hastily taken bath, Aurelia. The white wolf. The prisoner who was supposed to be locked away. The murmurs started immediately. Kaylin let them build. Let the confusion and fear and curiosity reach a crescendo. Then he raised one hand, and the room went silent. 4 days ago, Kaylin said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space, I conducted a trial. The accused was Aurelia of Ashvale Pack. The crime was theft. The evidence was compelling. He paused. The evidence was also fabricated. The murmurs became gasps. Kaylin continued as if he hadn't heard them. Tonight, an assassin entered the East Tower with the intent to murder my prisoner. They carried weapons marked with the sigil of the Hunters Guild, an organization that has been officially disbanded for 50 years, but has, in fact, been operating in secret with the support of certain members of this court. All eyes turned to Counselor Denna. She stood near the back, her face a mask of shock. "Your Majesty, I assure you, I'm not finished." Kaelin's voice cracked like a whip. "The assassin is dead. But before they died, they carried a vial of concentrated wolfsbane that can only be acquired through guild channels. They also carried this." He held up a small leather-bound journal. "A contract. Signed. Paid for. With your seal, Counselor." Denna's face went white. "That's impossible. You never thought I'd find it." Kaelin descended the dais steps slowly, deliberately. "You never thought I'd connect the attempted murder of a prisoner to the systematic genocide of an entire bloodline. You never thought I'd discover that you've been working with the Hunters Guild for 15 years, arranging the deaths of anyone who might carry white wolf blood." The room erupted. Wolves shouting, demanding answers, accusations flying. Kaelin let the chaos build for exactly 10 seconds. Then his power flooded the room. Not his physical power. His alpha power. The weight of dominance that came from being a born king, from carrying a bloodline that had ruled for 6 generations. Every wolf in the room felt their knees weaken. Every wolf in the room remembered why they bowed. "Silence," Kaelin commanded. Silence fell like a guillotine. "Counselor Denna," Kaelin continued, his eyes locked on the woman who'd served his father, who'd advised him for 8 years, who'd smiled to his face while plotting genocide behind his back. "You are hereby charged with conspiracy, murder, and treason against the crown. Your assets are seized. Your title is revoked. And you will stand trial for your crimes. You can't do this." Denna's voice shook. Not with fear. With rage. "I served your father for 20 years. I've served you faithfully. You served yourself." Kaelin's voice went cold. "You served your fear. And you convinced yourself that murdering innocent wolves was somehow protection instead of genocide." He turned to address the full council. "For 300 years, we've been taught that white wolves were dangerous. That they were a threat to pack law, to stability, to the natural order. We were taught this by our parents, who were taught by theirs, who were taught by theirs." He paused. "But who taught the first generation? Who decided that an entire bloodline needed to be eradicated?" No one answered. "Kings," Kaelin said softly. "Kings who were afraid. Kings who saw power they couldn't control and chose murder over coexistence. Kings who wrote laws and histories and myths designed to justify genocide." He looked at Denna. "And counselors who enforced those laws without question. Without mercy. Without ever considering that maybe, just maybe, the threat was fabricated. They're dangerous." Denna's control finally snapped. "White wolves don't bow. They don't submit. They don't fit into pack law." "You're right." Kaelin's voice was quiet. "Dangerous. They don't bow. Because they were never meant to. Because 3,000 years ago, before pack law existed, white wolves were the first wolves. The original bloodline. And they didn't need to dominate to lead. They led through birthright." He turned to face Aurelia. And that terrified kings who'd built their power on force. He extended his hand. Aurelia took it. And the bond between them became visible, not physically, but felt. Every wolf in the room with any sensitivity to pack dynamics felt the pull, the power, the absolute certainty of a mate bond that had locked into place. The gasps were immediate. "No," Denna breathed. "No, you can't. She's my mate." Kaelin said it clearly, publicly, irrevocably. "The white wolf you tried to murder is my mate. And under pack law, an attack on a king's mate is an attack on the king himself. The law says I can execute you where you stand." Kaelin's eyes were winter cold. "And right now, my wolf is begging me to do exactly that. To rip out your throat for what you did to Aurelia's mother. For what you tried to do to Aurelia. For every white wolf you've murdered in the name of fear disguised as duty." Denna took a step back. Guards moved to block her escape. "But I'm not my father," Kaelin continued. "And I don't rule through fear. So you'll get a trial. Public. Transparent. Every crime documented. Every victim named. His smile was sharp. And then you'll die knowing that the bloodline you tried to erase is the reason you failed. He turned back to the council, still holding Aurelia's hand. As of tonight, the law regarding white wolves is suspended pending review. Any wolf found to be hunting, harming, or discriminating against white wolf bloodlines will answer directly to me. And I promise you, his voice dropped to something that made even the alphas in the room flinch. My justice will be swift. Your Majesty. One of the elder counselors stepped forward, his face troubled. With respect, the mate bond is sacred, but this is unprecedented. If she's truly a white wolf, if she carries that power. He trailed off. How can we be certain she hasn't influenced you? That the bond isn't a form of manipulation? It was the question everyone was thinking. The question Denna had probably been counting on. Kalen could have raged. Could have used his authority to shut down the doubt. Instead, he looked at Aurelia. Show them, he said quietly. Aurelia's eyes widened. Kalen. Not the shift. The other thing. His hand squeezed hers. Trust me. Aurelia didn't know what he meant. Until her wolf stirred, and suddenly she felt it. The power her mother had mentioned. The birthright Kalen had described. The thing that made white wolves different from every other wolf in existence. She could feel the pack bonds in the room. All of them. Every connection between alpha and beta, between pack member and leader, between wolves who'd sworn loyalty and wolves who'd earned it. She could feel them like threads in a tapestry. Could see where they were strong, where they were frayed, where they were tangled or broken or barely holding. And she could touch them. Not manipulate. Not control. Just understand. I can feel your bond with your alpha, Aurelia said, focusing on the elder counselor. It's strong. 40 years old. Forged in battle when you were both young. She turned to another counselor. Yours is newer. 6 years. Political marriage, but there's affection there. Real affection. Her gaze swept the room. And I can feel every wolf in this room who's lying about their loyalty. Who's pretending devotion while planning betrayal. Who? She stopped. Because she'd found something that made her blood run cold. There's another one, she said quietly. Kalen tensed. Another what? Another traitor. Aurelia's eyes locked on a wolf standing near the front, a young gamma who'd been silent throughout the entire proceedings. He's carrying wolfsbane. Planning to use it. Tonight. On. Her breath caught. On you. The gamma bolted. He made it 3 steps before Kara, who'd been standing in the shadows watching everything clotheslined him with enough force to drop him instantly. The vial of wolfsbane rolled across the marble floor, coming to rest at Kalen's feet. Well, Kara said, her foot on the gamma's chest. That's inconvenient. Kalen picked up the vial, his expression unreadable. Anyone else want to try to poison their king tonight? Because now would be a great time to confess. No one moved. No? Kalen looked at Aurelia. Anyone else in this room planning treason? Aurelia closed her eyes, letting her awareness spread through the bonds in the room. It was overwhelming, like trying to hear individual voices in a crowd of thousands. But she pushed through the noise, searching for the sour note that indicated deception, betrayal, murderous intent. 2 more, she said finally. Both carrying weapons. Both planning to strike if the opportunity presented. The 2 wolves tried to run. They didn't make it far. When the dust settled, 5 wolves were in custody. And the rest of the council was staring at Aurelia like she'd just proven every fear they'd ever been taught. This, one of the counselors said, his voice shaking, this is exactly why white wolves are dangerous. She can see our bonds. Can feel them. What's to stop her from manipulating them? From turning us against each other? From me. Kalen's voice cut through the rising panic. I'm what stops her. Because she's my mate, and I know her heart. He moved to stand beside Aurelia, his hand finding hers again. But more importantly, she stops herself. Because she's not a monster. She's a wolf who's been hunted her entire life for the crime of existing. And instead of using her power to take revenge, she just saved my life. The words landed like stones in still water. So here's what's going to happen, Kaelin continued. Counselor Denna and her conspirators will stand trial. The law regarding white wolves will be rewritten. And Aurelia will remain at my side as my mate, as is her right under pack law. His eyes swept the room. Anyone who has a problem with this can challenge me. Publicly. Right now. Alpha to alpha. And we'll settle it the old way. Silence. No one was stupid enough to challenge the Alpha King in direct combat. Especially not when his mate was a white wolf who could apparently sense treason like a bloodhound. Good. Kaelin's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then we're done here. Council dismissed. The wolves filed out slowly, reluctantly, their eyes lingering on Aurelia with a mixture of fear and fascination. When the last of them had gone, Aurelia's legs finally gave out. Kaelin caught her, lowering them both to the floor. I've got you, he murmured. You did perfectly. I can't do that again, Aurelia said, her voice shaking. Feeling all those bonds. It was like drowning in other people's emotions. You won't have to. Kaelin pressed his forehead against hers. That was a one-time show of power. To prove you're not a threat. To prove your abilities are defensive, not offensive. They still fear me. Yes. He didn't lie to her. But fear can become respect. Given time. And if it doesn't? Kaelin's arms tightened around her. Then we'll deal with it. Together. Aurelia wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that love could overcome 300 years of prejudice, that a mate bond could protect her from a world that wanted her dead, that a king's declaration could rewrite laws etched in blood. But as she sat there in the throne room, surrounded by the ghosts of wolves who'd just proven that even those closest to Kaelin wanted him dead, Aurelia felt the first real whisper of doubt. Not doubt in Kaelin. Doubt in survival. Because they'd just won a battle. But the war had only just begun. The attack came 3 days later. Not in the palace. Not during a council meeting. Not in any place Kaelin's security could anticipate. It came in the market district at dawn, when Aurelia had slipped away from the castle, against Kaelin's explicit orders, against every logical instinct, because she'd needed to breathe. 3 days of being the Alpha King's mate. 3 days of wolves staring at her like she was a bomb waiting to detonate. 3 days of sleeping in Kaelin's chambers, feeling the bond grow stronger with every hour, every touch, every whispered conversation in the dark where they pretended they weren't both terrified of what came next. She'd needed space. Just for an hour. Just to remember what it felt like to move through the world without a crown hanging over her head. Kara had volunteered to accompany her, silent, watchful, her hand never far from the blade at her hip. They'd made it 4 blocks from the castle when Aurelia smelled it. Silver. Wolfsbane. And something else. Something chemical that made her wolf recoil. Kara. The explosion tore through the market like the world ending. One moment, Aurelia was standing beside a fruit vendor. The next, she was flying backward, her body slamming into a brick wall with enough force to crack stone. Her vision went white. Then red. Then she was shifting without conscious thought, her white wolf erupting in a cascade of light and fury because her body knew what her stunned mind couldn't process. Ambush. Not 1 wolf. 20. Maybe more. They came from everywhere, rooftops, alleyways, storefronts that had been empty seconds before. All wearing black. All carrying silver weapons. All moving with the coordinated precision of soldiers who'd trained for this exact scenario. The Hunters Guild. Aurelia's wolf snarled, her massive frame already moving, already fighting, already doing the impossible math of 20-to-1 odds. Kara was beside her in an instant, also shifted, a sleek gray wolf with scars and speed and absolutely no fear. Run. Kara's voice in her head through the pack bond. I'll hold them. I don't run. You die here and Kaelin loses everything. But Aurelia couldn't run. Not from this. Not anymore. 7 years of running had ended the night she'd shifted in that throne room. 7 years of being small and scared and invisible had died the moment Kaelin had claimed her as his mate. And if she ran now, if she let these hunters think fear still controlled her, she'd spend the rest of her life running. So she fought. The first hunter lunged with a silver spear. Aurelia dodged, her jaws closing around the weapon's shaft and snapping it like kindling. The second hunter came from above, dropping from a rooftop with a blade aimed for her spine. Kara intercepted, slamming into them midair with enough force to send them both crashing into a market stall. The third, fourth, and fifth hunters attacked as one, coordinated, practiced, deadly. Aurelia's wolf moved like water, like moonlight, like something that had been born to fight and had simply forgotten until now. Her claws tore through armor. Her teeth found flesh. Her power, that ancient white wolf power that predated kingdoms, rolled off her in waves that made even the trained hunters hesitate. But there were too many. For every hunter she dropped, two more appeared. And they had silver. So much silver. A blade caught her flank. Another grazed her shoulder. A third opened a line of fire across her ribs. Silver didn't just cut. It burned. It prevented healing. It turned every wound into a countdown. Kara was bleeding too, her gray fur matted with red, but she was still fighting, still snarling, still buying Aurelia precious seconds. The castle, Kara gasped through their bond. I sent the alert. Kaelin's coming. Not fast enough. Because Aurelia could see it in the hunter's eyes. They weren't trying to capture her. Weren't trying to wound and retreat. They were trying to kill her before the Alpha King arrived. This was their one chance. Their perfect moment. The white wolf separated from her mate, vulnerable, exposed. And they were going to take it. A hunter with a crossbow appeared on a rooftop, the bolt already aimed at Aurelia's heart. She saw it. Saw the trajectory. Saw exactly where it would land. And she knew she couldn't dodge in time. The bolt fired. Kara threw herself in front of Aurelia. The bolt meant for a white wolf's heart punched through a gray wolf's chest instead. Kara hit the ground and didn't get up. No. Aurelia's roar shattered windows 3 blocks away. Her power, the power she'd been carefully controlling, carefully burying, finally broke free. Not the shift. Not the physical strength. The other power. The birthright. Every wolf in a 6-block radius felt it. The crushing weight of dominance that didn't ask, didn't demand, simply was. The kind of power that existed before pack law, before hierarchies, before the idea that strength could be measured or challenged. The hunters froze. Not because they wanted to. Because their wolves, every instinct bred into them over thousands of years, recognized something their human minds couldn't accept. Alpha. Not an alpha. The alpha. The first. The original. The dominion that had been systematically erased because its existence was an undeniable truth. When a white wolf stood, other wolves knelt. Aurelia didn't make them kneel. Her power did it for her. 20 hunters dropped to their knees like puppets with cut strings, their weapons falling from nerveless fingers, their wolves whimpering in submission to something they'd never encountered but instinctively understood. And Aurelia, standing over Kara's bleeding body, her white fur stained red, her eyes burning with ice and fury, finally remembered what her mother had tried to tell her 7 years ago. You don't bury a white wolf to hide. You bury it to keep everyone else safe. Because this crushing, absolute, terrifying power, this was what kings had feared for 300 years. This was why they'd hunted her bloodline to extinction. Not because white wolves were dangerous. Because they made every other wolf's power look like a child playing at Dominion. Aurelia looked at the hunters kneeling before her, their faces twisted with fear and rage and the horror of wolves who'd spent their lives hunting prey that had just proven itself predator. She could kill them. Right now. While they were helpless. Could rip out 20 throats before they could even think to resist. Could make them pay for Kara, for her mother, for 300 years of genocide disguised as law. Her wolf wanted to. But then she felt it. The bond. Pulling. Screaming. Kaelin was coming. And if he arrived to find her standing over 20 dead bodies, covered in blood, her power still radiating like a beacon. The council would never accept her. the packs would revolt. And Kalen would have to choose between his mate and his crown. So Aurelia did the hardest thing she'd ever done. She pulled her power back. Not buried. Not suppressed. Just contained. The hunters gasped as the pressure released, their bodies sagging with relief. Go, Aurelia said, her voice rough, still half-growl. Tell your guild that the white wolf they hunted is done running. Tell them that if they come for me again, I won't stop next time. Her eyes swept across them, ice blue and ancient. And tell them that the Alpha King will be hunting them now. Every member. Every safe house. Every secret they've kept for 300 years. She bared her teeth. You should have killed me when you had the chance. The hunters ran. Scrambling, stumbling, some still crawling because their legs wouldn't hold them. Within seconds, the market was empty except for Aurelia and Kara's unconscious form. Aurelia shifted, her human hands shaking as she pressed them against the wound in Kara's chest. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you dare die for me. Kara, please. Kara's eyes fluttered open, pain-glazed but aware. Did you just let them go? I couldn't. You could have. Kara's laugh turned into a cough, blood staining her lips. You could have killed them all. I felt it. That power. Her hand found Aurelia's. You're not what they think you are. What am I? Mercy. Kara's eyes started to close. Mercy they don't deserve, but maybe what we need. Then Kalen was there. He appeared like a storm made flesh, shifted and massive, and absolutely enraged. His gray wolf took in the scene in seconds. The blood, the destruction, his sister dying, his mate covered in wounds. He shifted to human form before he'd fully stopped moving, his hands joining Aurelia's on Kara's chest. How bad? His voice was steady, but Aurelia could feel the terror through the bond. Silver bolt. Through the chest. Aurelia's own voice shook. She jumped in front of me. Kalen, I'm so sorry. Don't. His eyes met hers, and they were burning. Don't apologize for being alive. He looked down at Kara. Stay with me. That's an order. Kara's eyes opened again, just a crack. Since when do I follow your orders? Since always. You just pretend you don't. Kalen's hands were glowing with a soft blue light, alpha healing magic, fueled by pack bonds and sheer force of will. I need you, Kara. I need you to fight. Fighting is exhausting. But Kara's breathing was evening out, the worst of the bleeding slowing. More wolves arrived, Kalen's personal guard, palace healers, dark-looking murderous. They loaded Kara onto a stretcher with efficiency born of practice. Kalen stood, pulling Aurelia up with him. You're hurt, he said, his hands gentle as they catalogued her wounds, the silver burns that weren't healing, the cuts that were still bleeding. I'm fine. You're not fine. His jaw was tight. You left the castle. Against my orders. Against every security protocol. I know what you needed. Kalen pulled her close, his forehead pressing against hers. I know you feel trapped. I know this life is suffocating. I know you're not used to being protected. His hands framed her face. But if you died today, if that bolt had hit you instead of Kara, his voice broke. I would have burned the world, Aurelia. Every kingdom. Every pack. Every wolf who'd ever spoken against you. I would have become the monster they feared just to make them pay for taking you from me. Aurelia's breath caught. Kalen. I love you. The words came out raw, desperate. I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other a week. I know the bond makes everything complicated and confusing and impossible to untangle. But I love you. Not because of the bond. Because of who you are. Because you could have killed 20 hunters today, and you chose mercy. Because you jumped in front of my sister's death and took wounds meant for me. Because you're strong and terrified and brave and so damn stubborn. Aurelia kissed him. Desperate. Claiming. Tasting like blood and tears and 7 years of loneliness finally ending. When they broke apart, she whispered against his lips, I love you too. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I scared you. I'm sorry I put Kara in danger. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for surviving. Kalen's hands were in her hair, his eyes burning into hers. Start fighting with me. Not alone. Not anymore. With me. Together. Together. He kissed her again, softer this time. Always. The trial of Counselor Denna began at dawn on the 7th day. The throne room was packed not just with wolves from 6 kingdoms, but with witnesses. Families of white wolves who'd been murdered. Survivors of the purge. Wolves who'd lost mates, children, entire bloodlines to the Hunters' Guild. Denna stood in silver chains, her face a mask of defiance. Kalen sat on his throne, Aurelia beside him, not on a lower seat, but on a throne of equal height that he had crafted in 3 days specifically for this moment. A statement. A declaration. A truth. She was his mate. His equal. His queen in everything but official title. And the council could choke on it. Counselor Denna, Kalen said, his voice carrying across the vast space. You are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit genocide, treason against the crown, and directing the Hunters' Guild in violation of crown law. He paused. How do you plead? Not guilty. Denna's voice was steady. Everything I did for the protection of these kingdoms. For the stability of pack law. For fear. Aurelia spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but absolute. You did it because you were afraid. Because a white wolf looked at your alpha once and he lowered his eyes, and you couldn't understand how power could exist without force. Denna's face twisted. You don't know. I know exactly. Aurelia stood, descending from her throne with the grace of a wolf who'd finally stopped hiding what she was. Because I felt your bond. During the council meeting. I felt how your alpha submitted to my mother once, 30 years ago. How it broke something inside you. How you spent 3 decades trying to justify what you became, a murderer disguised as a protector. The crowd murmured. Denna's hands clenched into fists. Your mother was dangerous. My mother was a healer. Aurelia's voice shook with barely contained rage. She spent her life helping packs. Delivering babies. Treating wounds. Teaching young wolves how to control their shifts. She moved closer to Denna, and wolves instinctively moved out of her way. And you killed her because she was kind. Because she proved that white wolves weren't the monsters you needed them to be. Because if she was allowed to live, if she was allowed to show the world that our power could be used for healing instead of domination, then every law, every justification, every lie you'd built your career on would crumble. She could have controlled us all. Denna's control finally cracked. Don't you understand? White wolves don't need to fight for dominance. They just are dominant. They look at you and your wolf bows without your permission. That's not power, that's slavery. No. Kalen's voice cut through the room like a blade. That's what you chose to believe because it was easier than admitting you were wrong. He stood, moving to join Aurelia. I've been bonded to a white wolf for a week. And do you know what I felt? What my wolf has experienced in her presence. Silence. Safety. Kalen's hand found Aurelia's. My wolf feels safe with her. Not dominated. Not controlled. Safe. Because her power doesn't demand submission, it invites trust. And you're so twisted by fear that you can't tell the difference. The others will come, Denna said, her voice dropping to something darker. Even if you execute me, the guild won't stop. They'll keep hunting her. Keep hunting every white wolf they find. Because we know the truth. What truth? Aurelia challenged. That you'll outlive us all. Denna's smile was bitter. White wolves live 3 times longer than normal wolves. You'll watch everyone you love die. Watch kingdoms rise and fall. And eventually, you'll stop seeing us as equals and start seeing us as temporary. As insects with short lives and shorter memories. She looked at Kalen. She'll watch you age and die, Your Majesty. And then she'll find another king. And another. And another. Until she's the only constant in a world that keeps changing. Until she's bored with our mortality. Denna leaned forward as far as her chains allowed. That's why we hunt you. Not because of what you are now. Because of what you'll become. The words landed like stones. And Aurelia felt something crack inside her chest. Because Denna wasn't entirely wrong. White wolves did live longer. Did watch generations pass. Did carry memories that spanned centuries. And she hadn't let herself think about what that meant. That Kaelin would age and she wouldn't. That he would die and she would continue. That loving him meant signing up for heartbreak measured in decades. Kaelin felt her falter through the bond. Felt the moment Denna's words found their mark. "You're right," he said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at him. "She will outlive me," Kaelin continued. "By decades, probably. Maybe centuries." He looked at Aurelia, his eyes burning with something fierce and certain. "And I don't care, Kaelin. I don't care," he repeated. "Because I would rather have 50 years with you than 500 years without you. I would rather die at 90 knowing I spent every day of my life loving you than live to 200 alone." His hand tightened on hers. "And when I do die, when my body finally gives out and yours is still young, I'll die knowing I was loved by someone extraordinary. That I had the privilege of standing beside the most powerful wolf in 6 kingdoms and watching her choose mercy over vengeance, compassion over cruelty, love over fear." Tears were streaming down Aurelia's face. "So yes," Kaelin turned back to Denna. "She'll outlive me. She'll outlive everyone in this room. She'll watch kingdoms fall and new ones rise. And maybe, just maybe, she'll use all those years to make sure that what happened to her bloodline never happens to anyone else. That fear doesn't get to masquerade as protection. That genocide doesn't get to hide behind laws." He looked at the crowd, his voice rising. 300 years ago, my ancestors made a choice born of fear. They looked at power they couldn't understand and chose murder. And we've been living with that choice ever since, with the guilt, the paranoia, the constant terror that maybe we were wrong. That maybe the monsters we created were just wolves trying to survive. He paused. "Today, we make a different choice." Kaelin signaled to Darkin, who stepped forward carrying a wooden box. From the box, Kaelin withdrew a scroll, ancient, yellowed, sealed with wax that bore the mark of his grandfather's ring. "The Eradication Decree," Kaelin said. "Signed 300 years ago. The law that made white wolves enemies of the realm. The law that justified hunting them like animals. The law that turned prejudice into policy." He held it up for everyone to see. Then he set it on fire. The scroll burned quickly, curling into ash in his hands. "As of this moment," Kaelin declared, "the Eradication Decree is void. White wolves are no longer enemies of the crown. Any wolf found hunting or harming them will be tried for murder. Any pack found sheltering hunters will lose their territory. And any alpha who questions this law will answer to me personally." The room erupted. Some wolves cheering. Some protesting. Some simply staring in shock at a king who'd just rewritten 300 years of history. Kaelin waited for the noise to die down. "As for you, Counselor Denna." He turned back to the woman in chains. "You are found guilty. The sentence is death." Denna's face went white. "You can't." "I can. I am." Kaelin's voice was flat. "But, because I'm not a monster, I'll give you a choice. You can die by execution, public and swift. Or you can die by exile, stripped of your wolf, sent into the wilderness alone, and forbidden from ever returning to civilized lands." Both were death sentences. One was just slower. "Why?" Denna's voice shook. "Why offer me anything?" "Because Aurelia asked me to." Kaelin glanced at his mate. "She believes everyone deserves the choice you never gave her mother. To run or to fight. To face death or flee from it." His eyes hardened. "I think you deserve nothing. But she's a better wolf than I am." Denna looked at Aurelia, and for the first time, something like understanding flickered across her face. "Exile," she said finally. "I'll take exile." "So be it." Kaelin nodded to the guards. "Strip her wolf. Send her north. And if she's ever seen in these kingdoms again, kill her on sight." They dragged Denna away. She went silently, her eyes locked on Aurelia until the doors closed. When she was gone, Kaelin turned to address the assembly one final time. "Today marks the end of an era. The end of hunting our own. The end of letting fear dictate law." He looked at Aurelia, pride, and love written across his face. And the beginning of something new. Something better. Something that remembers we're all wolves, white, gray, alpha, omega, and we all deserve the chance to exist without terror. He extended his hand. Aurelia took it. And together, they faced a room full of wolves who were witnessing history. I present to you, Kalen said, his voice carrying absolute conviction, Aurelia of the White Wolf bloodline. My mate. My equal. And your queen. The title hung in the air for 3 heartbeats. Then Kara, still bandaged but standing in the front row, dropped to one knee. Long live the queen, she said clearly. Darken followed. Then another guard. Then another. One by one, wolves throughout the room knelt. Not in submission. Not in fear. In recognition. In respect. In acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, their world was big enough for power that didn't demand submission. Aurelia looked at Kalen, her eyes wide. He smiled. I told you. We'd make a world where you didn't have to hide. We did it, she whispered. We did it, he confirmed. And for the first time in 7 years, Aurelia felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Freedom. 6 months later, Aurelia stood on the balcony of the palace, watching the sun rise over 6 kingdoms that had finally stopped trying to kill her. It hadn't been easy. There had been protests, attacks, 3 assassination attempts in the first month alone. But Kalen had been relentless. He dismantled the Hunters Guild piece by piece, exposing every member, seizing every safe house, destroying every weapon cache they'd built over 3 centuries. He'd rewritten laws, reformed the council, created a new position, the White Wolf Advocate, dedicated to finding and protecting any surviving members of her bloodline. They'd found 12 white wolves scattered across 6 kingdoms, hidden in plain sight, terrified to reveal what they were. Aurelia had met each one personally, had shown them they weren't alone, had promised them protection under her mate's crown. Some had stayed. Some had left, choosing freedom over politics. She didn't blame them. But the ones who stayed, they were building something extraordinary. A pack. Not like other packs. Not hierarchical, not dominated by one alpha's will. A pack built on trust. On shared power. On the radical idea that wolves could choose their loyalty instead of having it forced. You're up early. Aurelia turned to find Kalen emerging onto the balcony, still sleep-rumpled, his hair a disaster. She loved him like this. Unguarded. Unperfect. Just hers. Couldn't sleep, she admitted. Too much happening. The delegation from the Eastern Territories arrives today. And Kara's threatening to set up a fighting ring in the courtyard for new recruits. She would. Kalen moved behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. How are you feeling about the delegation? Terrified. Good answer. He kissed her temple. If you weren't terrified, I'd be worried. These are the wolves who petitioned to have you executed 3 months ago. And now they're coming to, what? Apologize? Pledge loyalty? Spit in my face. All of the above, probably. Kalen's arms tightened. But they're coming. That's what matters. They're acknowledging that you're queen. That white wolves aren't the enemy. That their world didn't end when they stopped killing you. Aurelia leaned back against him, soaking in his warmth, his presence, the steady beating of his heart. The bond between them had only grown stronger. It didn't hurt anymore. Didn't pull or ache or demand. It just was. A constant hum of connection, of love, of 2 wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds and decided to fight for it. I never thanked you, she said quietly. For what? For choosing me. She turned in his arms, looking up at his face, the face she'd memorized in 100 quiet moments, the face that had become her home. You could have let me die. Could have chosen your crown over the bond. Could have been the king who sacrificed love for duty. I tried. Kalen's smile was self-deprecating. For about 4 seconds. Then my wolf staged a mutiny, and I remembered that kings who don't fight for the people they love aren't really kings. They're just wolves wearing crowns. Philosopher king, she teased. Lovesick fool, he corrected. There's a difference. Aurelia laughed, the sound easier now, lighter. The weight of 7 years of hiding finally lifted. I have something for you, Kaelin said, pulling back slightly. I was going to wait until tonight, but... He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. Aurelia's heart stopped. Kaelin, it's not what you think. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, but not a typical one. The band was made of white gold, delicate and strong, and set into it was a single stone that glowed with an inner light, pale blue-white, like moonlight made solid. Moon opal, Kaelin explained. Extremely rare. Only found in the northern mountains where white wolves used to live before. He trailed off. Anyway, I had it crafted specifically for you. It's not an engagement ring, we're already made it, the bond is permanent. I'm yours until death and probably beyond. His eyes met hers. It's a promise ring. A promise that I will spend every day of my life making sure you never have to hide again. That I will fight for you, protect you, stand beside you no matter what comes. And when I do die, his voice roughened. When I'm gone and you're still here, living the centuries I won't get to see, this ring will remind you that you are loved. Absolutely. Completely. By a king who thought he was too broken for happiness until a white wolf showed him he was wrong. Tears were streaming down Aurelia's face. Kaelin slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I love you, she whispered. I love you so much I don't have words big enough. Good thing we have centuries to find them. Kaelin pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted like promise and hope and forever. When they finally broke apart, the sun had fully risen, painting the kingdom in shades of gold and amber. Come on, Kaelin said, taking her hand. Let's go terrify a delegation. Together. Always together. They walked back inside, fingers intertwined, their shadows merging on the stone floor. Behind them, the balcony doors swung shut, revealing an inscription carved into the frame, words that would be repeated in histories written about this day, this moment, this impossible love story. Here stood the Alpha King and his White Wolf Queen who chose each other when the world chose fear, who rewrote laws with love instead of blood, who proved that mercy was stronger than genocide, who remembered that power without compassion is just another word for tyranny. And beneath that, in smaller letters, they ruled for 53 years together until death took the king and left the queen to carry their story forward, which she did for 300 years more until she found another white wolf and taught them what it meant to be free. 300 years later, the young white wolf stood in the ruins of the old palace, her white fur gleaming in moonlight. She'd been running for 7 years. Hiding. Burying her wolf just to survive. Just like Aurelia had. But tonight, the first full moon of her 18th year, something had changed. She'd found this place. These ruins. This story carved into stone. And she'd realized something that made her heart pound and her wolf surge. She wasn't the first. She wasn't alone. And if one white wolf had survived long enough to become queen, maybe she could too. The young wolf lifted her head and howled. Not in fear. Not in hiding. In defiance. In hope. In the absolute certainty that survival wasn't enough anymore. It was time to thrive. Somewhere in the ether, in whatever place dead wolves went when their bodies finally gave out, Aurelia heard that howl. And she smiled. Because the story wasn't over. It was just beginning again. Hey there, beautiful souls. If you made it this far, thank you for being part of Aurelia and Kaelin's journey. This story was about more than just a white wolf and an alpha king. It was about choosing love over fear, mercy over vengeance, and fighting for a world where everyone deserves to exist without terror. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Drop a comment telling me what you thought. Did the ending hit you in the feels? Which part was your favorite? Where are you watching from? And remember, you're never too broken for happiness. You're never too different to be loved. And you're never too scared to choose courage. Until next time, keep your hearts wild and your wolves wilder. This is Cindy's Wolfheart Stories, reminding you that every ending is just a new beginning in disguise. Stay magical, Wolfpack.